Hello YouTube, this is Tofu speaking, and welcome to my September 2022 Princess Connect Redive PvP Viability Guide. Let me know in the comment section if you want me to make more of these kinds of videos. So, what has changed really? On the PvP side, there really isn't much. It's a bit of a breather month really, but we have some new tools at our disposal to make our arena life a bit easier, or if you're playing on defense, a bit harder for your opponent. We have received new additions in Halloween Misogi, Halloween Mimi, and Reno 6-star Ascension, which basically says more power creep. Yes, there's more power creep because there really isn't nothing but going up instead of going sideways in the design space. Although not super easy to tag into already existing teams, these three characters have pushed what it means to AoE cleave in Arena. Of course, there isn't just physical AoE cleaving going on in Arena. Kero 6-star has already taken the meta game by storm at this point, and alongside Reno has pushed the arena tier into either you play Mage Melt or you play Reno Turbo, basically. It's a bit of a duality that most people tend to just lean towards, especially towards the Reno side, because the Reno side is a bit easier rather than the Kero side. The Kero side does need a couple of supports to get going and has a much less explosive first 10 seconds, but still is a very powerful option if you want to break past walls that normally couldn't be broken with Reno, for example. Despite the lack of broken units added into, well, generally this pool of months, the updates that we receive right now has taken an impact towards the metagame and how it shaped us in playing for the next month. Because next month is probably even more bonkers, and will take Reno into something that is beyond human. As usual, the rules still apply. All units here are on the priconne EN server up until September 2022 and takes both offensive and defensive arena capabilities into account. For Princess Arena, especially if you're playing high tier, their capacity of plating blind teams is also accounted. If a unit is able to check multiple styles of play or is capable of just weathering through it, then it would be ranked higher than its other counterparts. If the unit has unique equipment, said unit will be rated with the unit equipment already equipped and perhaps at max level if possible. And if unit is 6-star, they will be also rated with their 6-star stats and the 6-star UB into account. So first, I would like to explain what I feel are in the staples tier. This tier consists of only the best units, the most meta warping units, and the units which are very worth the investment of your gems and time to raise as well as to use. They are very good for Arena, and the builds that they share are normally the same as VB or they aren't used in Clan Battle at all. So first is Rima. Who is Rima? She is certainly not human, but what she brings to the table is something no other tank ever did. She is the only tank with a unique entry mechanic that lures the enemy team more to your side for added cleave effectiveness. This allows cleavers or cleave deep that do not have retargeting cleave on their kit, such as Halloween Shinobu, such as Mitsuki, such as Halloween Mimi, and especially such as Reno 6-star, to have higher effectiveness on the damage and allows them to pin down backline. Very, very important for those kind of teams and allows them to become much more powerful than they naturally be. Her unique equipment especially gives physical defense, magical defense, and a shield on entry. This allows Rima to become more tanky at the start of battle, absorbing several hits before expiring, which is very important for her because she does not have a self-healing skill. She also has a stun on her skill too. It is single target, but it is very strong if you're pairing it with other stun sources such as Mitsuki, such as Masumi, and others. There are a lot of situations where Pecorin 6-star would just straight up win the game because she heals constantly and never die, especially on defense. Pecorin, in that regard, Rima is one of the best checks to take the game, as Pecorin herself cannot heal. If Pecorin cannot heal, then she literally just becomes a beat stick. And if you're just a mid shield at that point, you're pretty much set to lose. Same goes for Miyako. If you can stun her out of her ghost form or her self heal, she is literally just a mid stick. It doesn't matter how much defense they have. If they can't move, you win, basically. And most importantly for Rima, her 6-star is due next month, which is ridiculous because Rima is already tanky, and having more HP and more defense on the tank is terrifying. Expect a lot of molding to come next month for her. And, well, her cons, I mean, she technically exposes your position to units. So if your position to unit is kind of a fragile unit like Summer Kaori, for example, or maybe Yukari, or maybe some cases maybe like they're gonna be exposed to the action 1 of enemy units, and so they might die before Rima actually come to her location and actually start tanking people. A bit of a risk reward there, but I believe people who use Rima probably already cope or already accepted of this fact, and it probably doesn't really matter what them anyway. And she definitely needs her unique equipment to make her a staple, because not only it gives her the shield, but the extra defenses that it gives are also very important for her. Although Miyako does not have the highest physical defense on paper, she definitely is one of the premier physical walls in Arena. This is in conjunction with her stats and skills, especially her skill 1, which is Boo, literally turning her into a ghost form for 12 seconds, and then when she leaves her ghost form, she gains a dodge stat boost. The dodge stat is not something that you often see on units, but Miyako takes advantage of her dodge stat to full effect to be able to check many units at once, in not just physical units but also maybe some magical hits if she gets lucky. And her skill 1 and Union Burst both gives her extra healing, especially as skill 2 activates after she leaves her ghost form, and her Union Burst just triggers anytime she needs to, or in retaliation of a powerful enemy push. Excellent self-sustain between those two skills allows Miyako to be very reliable at tanking hits, especially for physical hits, and is able to shock off maybe some of that magical defense that she does not really have, and allows her to become one of the juggernauts of Arena. Basically, if you talk about priconne Arena, Miyako and Kuka are definitely two of the most notorious units to face. As for her weakness, well, she doesn't have magical defense. Try as you may, that she really can't take more than 1 or 2 hits of any sort of magical bursts aimed at her. And for that reason, she really is reliant on dodge to be able to avoid those hits. And because her dodge is part of her skill cycle, she is also weak to stuns. If she can't heal, like Pecorin, she dies. Well, that's pretty much the gist of it. Self-healing skills are reliant on you actually getting the skill cycle. If you're stunned, then the skill does not work. Kuka is, in my opinion, one of the best beginner tanks in the game because of her availability and stats, as well as her skills. And in Arena, she turns into one of the most powerful solo tanks in the game. This is in combination with her stats and skills. Kuka naturally has very high magic defense. This allows her to shrug off magic attacks and magic bursts aimed at her, unless she is interrupted, of course. But that all pales in comparison to her skill 1. The skill 1 gives her taunt, which is the thing that Kuka is very known for. She is able to keep on taunting auto attacks, keep on taunting non-cleave attacks basically, and keep her pinned down while she charges up her TP bar to fire off a powerful self-healing Union Burst, which allows her to heal for normally around 40 to 50% of her HP. Maybe even more if you give Union TP HP recovery boost on her. She also has buffed physical defense when she uses her taunt skill. This allows her to keep on using her, keep on tanking physical hits, even though she's not realistically able to taunt that much, but it allows her to keep on being very self-sufficient, and it does not hinder her in any way. However, to unlock this power, she definitely needs her unique equipment, which is probably not the easiest thing to get if you're a new player, and probably if you don't invest in Kuka, you probably need her unique equipment anyway, and she does not have any offensive skill at all. If your entire team wipes and Kuka is the only person remaining, then you basically already lose the game if you are running on offense. On defense though, she probably does have some sort of tanking capability depending on if you have some supports going on for her, but it doesn't change the fact that Kuka is still one of the best tanks in the game and should not never be underestimated in any shape or form, despite not having a dodge skill. Oh boy! It's time to talk about Kamina girls, and I love talking about Kamina because they are some of my favorite girls in the game. So let's talk about one of them, Tsumugi. The beauty of Tsumugi is that she can be placed in any sort of team style and still work very well. She is still meta warping as she was in 2022, as she was in 2021. She is a brawler, which means that she has high TP regeneration. She has pretty good bulk, which means she can survive some beatings without actually dying. And most importantly, she has a very powerful Union Burst, which can stun almost everyone really in the game because of her positioning and her range, of the stun is also 4 seconds, and the damage is not nothing to shake a stick at. Eventually, if you loop this thing a lot, you get cumulative damage which stacks into a kill later on. And so, with that in mind, she can be played as a lead, as against him without much offensive pressure, as both a stunner and an action manipulator. So you get the action initiative and the damage initiative, and the opponent does not. You can play her as a sub tank, which is where she was designed for in the first place. Even within her own guild, she sits behind Nozomi, so she definitely has some leeway when it comes to positioning. She also can work as DPS. As I said before, her DPS is actually not bad. The problem is that she does not fare well against super tank units such as Miyako, Kuka, and Rima. However, if someone gives her a TP boost buff as well as an attack buff, someone like Kokoro for example, a 6-star version, then Tsumugi can be a pretty formidable unit in her own right. There isn't really much to say about Tsumugi other than the fact that she is really good and really strong, and continues to be meta warping until way down the line as DPS levels will increase and Tsumugi is unable to troll them effectively. For now though, Tsumugi is extremely powerful and very self-sufficient in her role that including Tsumugi is as easy as just slotting someone out and putting Tsumugi in. There are some competitions when it comes to global stunners such as New Year's Ray, for example, which is almost a Tsumugi but really isn't. She really isn't meant to just super stun like that. But Tsumugi is definitely a more consistent looper when it comes to stuns. She's a really good crowd control unit and definitely something you need to watch out for Arena. Even if you don't want to play Arena, I still recommend you to raise Tsumugi because she is still a very good sub-tank for story content. Not really good for something like Luna Tower, but for story, pretty much like almost everyone is good. But Tsumugi is definitely better because she can manipulate the stats of some of the more tanky units, so your units can just blow everyone apart. Even in meta games or in levels where you basically already have game from recharging your DPS's TP bar. And speaking of Tsumugi, here comes New Year's Ray. And New Year's Ray is a bit of an oddball. Actually, like Tsumugi simping on Ray so much, I would like to know if anyone here actually hates Ray. I'm not trying to diss anyone, but I really just want to know who hates Ray, because those people are the rarest breed of priconne player in my opinion. Going back to topic, New Year's Ray is a very powerful crowd control tank. This is both in the combination of her low bulk, which is intentional, an action 1 taunt, which is intentional, and her powerful crowd control union burst, which is a 4-second stun. Her low bulk coupled with a taunt allows her to charge her TP bar as fast as some tanks, maybe like Tsumugi for example. It allows her to charge as fast as Tsumugi and then fire off her UB and then do it again. This is also reference to her position, which is just in front of Pecorin. And just in front of Pecorin means that she actually is extremely open to attacks, even without her taunt. It also allows her to become a pretty decent sub-tank if you play her with Kuka or with Miyako or with Rima for example, dragging them back and then you can fire off your UB, as well as being a pretty self-sufficient crowd control unit in her own right. She also comes with a magic shield. Now I don't know why you want a magic shield, but it's there. And also the fact that she has no bulk and no recovery means that she is one-time use only and pretty much dies to anything. But it's fine because that means like she already did her job. And with her job she will, because after that you will transition to your main tank in position 2 and win the game from there. New Year's Ray is a very great example of how low bulk on the unit actually is beneficial to them because they have other effects such as crowd control or self-heal, and it really shows a design philosophy that side games would follow in the following subsequent releases. Another issue that she runs over for now is that the fact that New Year's Ray has magical defense on her bond buff. This means that you cannot read her buff without breaking the original Ray. And original Ray is set to become one of the best 6 stars in the game on her launch, and you definitely do not want to break her by giving her 2 or 10 or 20 magical defense, which is extremely bad for her. As such, it would be wise for you to just lean her magical shield for extra magical bulk and don't read her bonds outside of her story 1. And we come to the first batch of the 6-star lineup, which is Pecorin. Pecorin is an extremely powerful offensive generalist tank whose specialist is being a big stat ball and having a lot of attack stats for a tank. This is in conjunction with the 6-star mechanic as well as her own skills, which benefits her a lot, that turns her into a powerful semi-DPS, very tanky unit. She has a self-healing skill in her skill 1, which everybody knows at this point, which is weak to stun because it's on a skill. But apart from that, she is still, if she can resolve this many times, she basically win the game. And she has also a reworked UB, which not only buffs her, doubles her damage, but it also buffs her physical and magical defense, as well as giving a new physical attack buff every time she uses it. Which means that because she's getting hurt often, she would continuously loop this and get a lot of stats from using her UB and her skill 1. There isn't really much to say about her skill 2, because her skill 1 and UB are basically all you need to know, but everything about her stats line, about her UB, and about her skill 1 is enough to make Pecorin into one of the juggernauts of this format. She is still weak to stun, she's still weak to any sort of interruption, like bind, like poison, for example. She does lose a bit hard to Aoi Venom, for example, and she cannot be manipulated in other ways when it comes to stats. Otherwise, she will fall out of favor. But it does not stop Pecorin from being one of the most splashable tanks in this format, and will probably continue to do so until, like, maybe Princess Pecorin. Also, there's a part of Pecorin which says that she can unlock Bond Buff, which means that she can almost have plus 2000 or 3000 HP from her bond stats alone, which allows her to generate a ton of advantage. Okay, so I'm really going to talk about Nozomi for 5 minutes, because the true Nozomi stream must indulge in, well, every aspect of it, actually. Well, so Nozomi is still the best sub-tank in the game, apart from, well, do you need a sub-tank? Well, I guess if your team does need a proper healer, or your team is in need of a compression, well, she is basically the girl to go to. There is almost no wrong in using Nozomi, either in the main tank scenario or in the sub-tank scenario. Nozomi, at least, she can work as a budget Pecorin. For example, if you need 2 Pecorins in Princess Arena, well, Nozomi is definitely there. In several cases, Nozomi is probably slightly better than Pecorin. There are some nuances that give Nozomi into the status of the most powerful beginner and still to the endgame tank as of now. There is the fact that her skill 1 is a stun. Although the stun does not have high range, it's only stacked at 200, it also lowers their physical attack after getting hit, which is only available at unique equipment. And although the unique equipment is not very intimidating at first glance, it does have dodge stat. Why? I have no idea. Maybe because she's an idol and she needs to have lots of steps around. And perfectly for me, that's actually pretty reasonable explanation. And apart from that, she also has a heal. Skill 2 Idol's Encouragement, which is a pretty sizable heal for anyone on the front line. In the front line meta, Nozomi's second skill is very powerful because it can just, like, the extra heal that she gives around is enough for her to, like, hey, I'm going to heal you, now win the game, basically. It allows her to just, like, bounce someone that's almost low on health, for example, like, say, Muimi, because Muimi conveniently just sits in the back of Nozomi exactly one space, which allows her to, like, have added protection from, like, say, targeting. From, like, for example, you can put Muimi on P3 for as an example. And Nozomi has physical and magical defense EX stats, although it isn't really important. You should also know that Nozomi's bond buff is all magic defense. Although this would get changed to physical attack later on, it will still be noticed as Nozomi still has one of the best 5-star, no 6-star are included in this conversation, like general bulk. She has high physical bulk, high magical bulk, pretty decent attack stat, which is not really needed, like, who use Nozomi to attack. Maybe there's some parts where, like, hey, I maybe go for a better glamorous slice damage, and most importantly, her UB, it gives her physical defense, magical defense, and has a proper taunt in it. There's some nuances between Kuka's taunt and Nozomi's taunt. Nozomi's taunt is better for longer games, where she, like, draws the attention of enemy UBs, for example, like it goes on her, while Kuka's UB is better for taunting skills. The choice is definitely on you if you want to put Nozomi as a sub-tank or as a main tank. I think that the part where Nozomi is a main tank now is pretty much dead at this point because, like, she cannot handle the added pressure of better units basically on all formats, she definitely can still survive until the end of the match. And if you rank her dodge up that good enough, like she probably can just dodge everything. But for now, like Nozomi is just a better sub tank really. The competition between sub tanks right now is a bit tough. Between Sumugi, for example, is a really good sub tank, and there's like good midline tanks as well as like Yukari, who actually has pretty decent bulk. Or you want Kurumi. Kurumi is right now pretty good as well because Kurumi is a pretty nice TP battery, although it isn't splashable in the teams. Like there are some like super turbo Rinokos which not doesn't facilitate Summer Saren because Summer Saren is too fragile, and so they rely on like say Kurumi plus Jita for their UB needs. And for that reason, like Nozomi does compete for slot in a team like that. But in general, like Nozomi is still very strong. If you want to put her as sub lead or in the main lead, and for that reason alone, I believe that Nozomi still holds a place as a staple, especially considering how easy for her you can level her up into 5-star and you get her UE. Of course, it doesn't matter much if you're not really playing Arena because she is completely bad in TB, almost unplayable really. But for Arena, she is still a very solid pick. For Princess Arena, for example, if you need a second or a tertiary tank, and she definitely is still one to consider, even going for the defense or going for offense. She can still win games. If there is one girl who I probably should just demote down to the strong tier instead of the stable tier, it would probably be Muimi, but Muimi is still an effective unit to use, even though the metagame has shifted down to just tanks and backlines or midline turbo basically. And although it is still true in that fact, there is also the fact that Muimi is also struggling with a lot of debuffs when she was first introduced, and it's no different now. But now the debuff that she has to face is harsher and much more dangerous to her especially. This is mainly because of her action 1, which is her skill 1, which is her jumping in front of the enemy. On Clan Battle, this isn't a problem because Clan Battle don't have debuffing bosses that has, I don't know, Misaki's bomb, for example, something like that. She can easily just jump there and like, hey, I have no problems doing that. But in PvP, you can't do that because if you jump in front of your tank, for example, you will get debuffed by, say, Misaki, or you will get stunned by, like, say, Sumugi, or you can get sliced on by Nozomi, for example. Those are just some examples, and I'm not listing the 500 examples of Muimi getting completely boned on her first action because she cannot do anything, and that is the issue that pretty much Muimi faced ever since her inception, is that she is a very high risk, high reward unit. Also the fact that the reward now is starting to wane a bit because of the fact that she needs her UB to be completely charged first, and right now, well, EO exists anyway, so you can just get charmed, then she TP steals you, then you lose like what, 10 seconds of your UB time, basically. She is still an extremely strong cleaver, don't get me wrong at that point. But the problem is that Muimi faces a lot of competition from skill-based cleavers. Right now, Halloween Mimi is a very good example that does like what, 2 action-based cleaves in a row. What the hell is that wrong with that girl, by the way? And apart from that, like, maybe she's still like decent in Princess Arena Game 3, where you already scouted, like, say, where the Misaki is, where the Min Stunner is, and you can drop Muimi, for example. However, when Muimi gets going, she is still extremely strong and is extremely powerful to the point where, hey, it's still worth using her. Although worth using in Princess Arena, of course, not worth using in Battle Arena. I think Battle Arena, Muimi is pretty much almost dead unless you're in the meta where like, oh, there's really not a lot of interruption going on, and well, Muimi can still thrive over that. That's the meta where Muimi is really good at. At the highest level of competition, maybe not so much. But at the lower end and the middle end, she's definitely still one to consider. As the meta game evolves and progresses, there's only one unit that becomes stronger as it goes, and that's Yukari. Yukari gets even stronger the more DPS and the more options that we get. No longer she's confined to just bombing people with Evia or becoming a healer in stock comps. She is now just a good unit that can be splashed into pretty much any team really. I don't know anything that does not dislike Yukari, sorry about that one. And apart from that, there is no real like bad downsides to Yukari. She has a heal, she is a TP battery, she is also an anti-magic, she can block Leo charms, maybe not a 6-star, but that will be rectified in December when she gets her 6-star. And there's also the fact that she gets a pretty decent like list of supports later on, where she becomes very, very, very rock solid to use. There's almost no downsides of using her. She can also now be used as a main tank because, well, you probably don't need a main tank, don't need a frontliner. You can have Yukari be the frontliner because she's pretty bulky in that regard, and she will definitely allow for some more flexible midline to backline compositions, especially for Princess Arena. Stuff like Reno Turbo can now put in, say, a Monica in the middle instead of having to force yourself to use a Rima, for example, like teams that does not, like, say, feature Halloween Misaki. There is always the fact that Yukari will always be good no matter the metagame, because even if her skills, one of her skills does nothing, two of her skills are very proactive and extremely good to use. Healing is always appreciated, TP battery is always good even if you are not using it to its fullest extent, and of course there's also the fact that, well, she will get an alternate form which is free, Yukari Christmas, and there is more buffs to get from that Yukari as well, which allows this Yukari to continue being one of the best supports in the game. So we come to the second stooge of the first batch of the 6-star upgrades, and that's Kokoro. Although the CB Kokoro is almost completely unplayable in a PvP setting because she has to sacrifice so much bulk that a Renoid 6-star UB can take her down from full to 0 HP without much issue. The PvP Kokoro, or the C41B Kokoro from last CB, is still very playable in a PvP setting, and is actually one of the best support units in that field. Chief of which is reckoned down to her UB, which is now a full-time AoE heal and grants all party members a physical attack up, magical attack up, and a TP boost up. Normally, TP boost up is something that is only recorded in hard stats such as unique equipment, but now you can have it on a UV, which is extremely strong, especially if you can semi-loop it with the harsh levels of disruption and damage burst in PvP. It is actually possible to just completely loop this UB, and chief of which is also because she has speed boost as part of her kit. This speed boost plus the TP boost allows her to become a very powerful, like, generally support, which can buff all allies' damage cycles and allows them to get damage initiative faster than the opponent. Of course, there's also the fact that this heal alone is still good enough to put her in a stall team, where these buffs are not really as good, but also she found herself also as a pretty sizable, like, main tank for, like, say, a backline focus team where you don't really need a TP battery from Yukari. In this part where you can actually loop the UB, Kokoro becomes a mighty powerful self-sustaining stat stick, which allows all teammates to benefit greatly from Kokoro. Of course, like, Kokoro does have some weaknesses in part of that. She does have to get some things going. Well, she needs a pretty high UE level if you want her to become a pretty sufficient tank, because she has HP recovery boost stat on her unique equipment, and that's something that you want to always consider. And of course, there's always the fact that, hey, maybe Kokoro does compete for slot with Yukari, and Yukari is sometimes better because Yukari is also a TP battery and Kokoro isn't. But apart from that, almost there is no bad team that does not like Kokoro, and Kokoro is always a pretty good splash on anything that needs some sort of backup that isn't, like, super offensive and such. Where Kokoro completely shines is where on the longer games where you don't really need TP boost as often as, like, say, a Yukari comp. Although Reno 6-star might take the cake as the best AoE cleaver right now, there's still no doubt in some people's minds that Summer Kaori is still definitely up there among the best of the best. This is because Summer Kaori shares a very minimal support list as the one that Reno employs, and also the fact that Summer Kaori also has a slightly different game plan than Reno. Although they're similar, they're pretty different in their own ways. The difference between Summer Kaori and Reno definitely is the fact that Summer Kaori is a brawler AoE cleaver. This means that Summer Kaori generates TP like a boss, such as, like, Tsumugi for example, and is able to punch out damage and kill enemies like crazy. Also the fact that Summer Kaori is a bit more front than, say, Reno. Summer Kaori does it in the middle, but you can definitely use almost any tank in the game right now. So basically, any front tank in the game is good tank for Kaori because she sits in the middle and she sits just in front of Saren. So Saren can target Kaori, for example. And stuff like Kurumi, who doesn't normally show up in, like, say, teams as a main tank, is a perfectly viable main tank for Kaori, just because of the fact that she sits in the middle, and Kurumi sits in the front. So she can tank for Kaori, for example. Or you can just straight up just let, Rima be done and whatnot, and Kaori is still a very powerful, say, member of that team. She is also very compatible with other cleavers such as Sama Bifuyu, Rino and Mimi, for example. And she is still, again, just a good unit in her own right. There's only several things that can hold her back. The chief of which is that Ram is able to shut you down for the first UB. So basically you have to loop it again to get the maximum UB value. And apart from that, like, she isn't very demanding such like that. But you still need to be very worried. You still have to worry about the effectiveness of Kaori, since the effectiveness of Kaori is pretty different from match to match. Sama Mifuyu is the safest, the most risk-free unit to use on an AoE cleave team, thanks to her punishing AoE hits from her skill 1 after her unique equipment, on which not only she can sneak some kills from backline mages and squishy midlines, but also is able to win by herself while sitting in a very favorable position. She sits just behind Halloween Shinobu by 1 tile, and so that is pretty much like the safest position that avoids all forms of action speed dodge or action speed manipulation. And her cleave, most importantly, it pivots from the frontmost enemy, so she can just pierce fragile backlines from the safest position. She has extra attack and crit buff from her skill 2, and a simple yet effective single target UB that is pretty helpful when she cannot punch through the more annoying tanks, and it doesn't really hurt herself because it doesn't really do anything to hinder her cleave performance. And of course, there's always the fact that she is very powerful to just slap into anything. You can slap her in stall, you can slap her in control, or you can slap her in like some Kaori teams or Rino teams. Maybe not Rino teams because she is pretty solid, and Rino teams does need every bit of support she can find, but Sama Mifuyu is definitely an option if you want to go for a more like control-y, like Rino, less dependent on Rino burst. Say like you want to just dodge Ram, for example, something like that. She is also independent from TP batteries and fits nicely into many AoE cliff comps, and many of them really love Sama Mifuyu from the safety of damage that she can bring to the table. Ah yes, Summer Saren. The only metagame where Summer Saren is bad is the only metagame where Summer Saren isn't even in the format. Summer Saren is always known for that unit where like, here, half TP on the start of battle. And this gives rise to a more aggressive UB metagame where just spamming UBs is basically how you win. And look at where we are now. We have Kiaru spamming UB, Rino spamming UB, and Samakori spamming UB. Everyone and their mom is spamming UB. Even like stuff like Mahiro is spamming UB, which is pretty fun. And there's almost no downside to this except from the fact that you can actually just interact with it, but most of the time you probably just bring a taunter tank like Liris Ray or Kuka who have softened the blow, so Saren cannot be taunted. And the fact that stuff like Hatsune and Tamaki are not really super, say, common to be placed on Arena. Maybe like once in a while you bring her out and then like throw people. By that point, you probably just like already killed the Tamaki, for example, or you just bring the counter team to Tamaki. Like maybe you just have to spend one defense loss, for example. And the fact that Sama Saren will always continue to be strong means that Sama Saren will never go out of style. She will always be a staple in almost every meta game that she can be a part of, and she will always strive to become the best unit in that team. Also the fact that Sama Saren pretty much doesn't really have a weakness apart from her taunt means that Sama Saren is completely fine to just min-max. If you want to min-max, you keep her EX at level 1. But apart from that, like you can just turbo out anyone you'll be using Sama Saren, which is the selling point of using her in the first place. Definitely have to raise, but keep her 3-star because having more means that she does not have follow-up for her buffing skills. Oh, speaking of buffing skills, yes, she has some. Her UB and skill 2 buff physical and magical attack, and her UB buffs their crit rate as well, which is pretty fun, especially if you want to pair her with any team. This means that Sama Saren can stick to any team, make them work, buff their TP, and give them more buffs, which is always very useful either if you want to loop it or if you want to just use it one at a time. Certainly one to consider even if she's not used for her TP buff. And so Nenreka continues her domination in the CB and PvP spheres. This is part because of her Union Burst, which provides a clone of herself which shares the skills and the stats of her, including the HP, and also her Union Burst gives her a field that buffs TP boost and magic attack to all allies within 250 range of herself. This is extremely powerful not because of just halving the skill cycle of Nenreka. It's extremely powerful, especially since Nenreka comes with a magic burst that has magic defense threat and a stun, very important, and also it buffs other mages as well. For example, Kiaru 6 wouldn't be half as powerful as if there is no Nenreka. She is still very powerful in her own right, but Nenreka takes her DPS and skyrocketed it into a higher plane of existence. There is also the fact that Nenreka herself doesn't actually die with age. Nenreka continues to be one of the premier support units in JP and CN servers, even though her relevance in PvP as a DPS is pretty much already down in the dirt. She is still capable of taking other mages to high levels of DPS. Of course, Nenreka doesn't actually fade out from existence, unlike most other support mages such as Summer Carry and Ana. Nenreka continues to be the prime support mage of the generations after it, still continuing to see play in the modern metagame, and having an ult that is really powerful for clan battle shows how strong that Nenreka continues to be in the following years. Reno 6-star is, well, should I say it, is one of the most meta-warping units of the current generation. Reno 6-star basically says no you to backline. It's literally cannot be countered by Ram unlike Summer Kaori, and can literally just loop her UB because she kills so fast and so often. If you get 3 kills, she immediately fires it again. And of course, we should not discount the fact that her Union Burst now has a 350% crit multiplier instead of a 200% crit multiplier. This means that she hits much harder, but the fact that it is tied to a crit does actually lower her effectiveness. There isn't really much to talk about Reno, apart from which she is really strong and literally just make Reno Cannon a strong team by itself. But also the fact that Reno is pretty rigid when it comes to teams. If you see a Reno team, you pretty much know what you're going into. You pretty much know what it's going to do, and you pretty much know that there's going the same 4 units that is going to show up, which is Rima, Yukari, Mitsuki, and Yuki. They're pretty much the same, and there's always a hard counter for it. But apart from the fact that if you're even going blind, then Regional Turbo is still very strong and literally just enables a lot of like the lower tier arena people to just suddenly climb up to first type rankings because of Reno's absurd DPS. Don't underestimate Reno. She doesn't actually fall off from the metagame. She actually just stays decent or like good, depending on the metagame. If the metagame is slow enough or the metagame is fast enough, then maybe Reno takes a back seat. But apart from that, Reno is still continuing to be a very strong archer that does not even compete with something like the likes of Duo Shiori. She is still very good by herself. This couple of months would be probably Misaki's swan song, where she stays in the relevant tier, because after this there will be a new replacement for Misaki that would completely overpass her, both in effectiveness and in damage, and because she is newer than Misaki, would probably have a hard time struggling to catch up. But apart from that, Misaki is still a very powerful anti-frontline mage. She drops a big bomb that says action speed reduced by 35%, which is really big for a lot of action speed units such as Mimi, such as Kaori, such as a lot of the PvP cleavers that stands in the front and middle line range. There's a reason why Mimi just dies 2 months immediately after she showed up, and that's because of Misaki's UE. Misaki's UE is that very strong, and it's still very powerful on blind teams or on like Princess Arena in general, because Princess Arena in general you probably still need Misaki's help because you really need like the extra magic support. There's not a lot of people who can do what Misaki do, and because of that, Misaki is still very relevant in today's meta. She does fall off a bit from Battle Arena, but is still very strong in Princess Arena, and for that reason I think she's still safe in the stable team. As I said before, that Pecorin is actually pretty weak to stuns and status conditions. This is none more exemplified than the existence of Aoi is still being the staple tier. This is because Aoi is the only unit with Venom right now that allows Aoi to chip away at Pecorin's health even without Kyoka, her original partner. And although Kyoka is still pretty good. Sometimes you don't run Aoi Kyoka, or sometimes you do, maybe in Princess Arena as like a third offensive team. Aoi Kyoka forms a very compact engine which gives any team a win con that allows them to, well, basically control the board, chip away at tanks, and then Kyoka will probably just use Ice Lance and just beat everyone down that way. There's a reason why Kyoka is still up here actually, but I'm going to talk about Aoi first. Aoi does not really fall off. The problem is that Aoi's relevance is just dependent on the metagame that we're in. If the metagame is still reliant on slow tanks trying to just outgrind you, then Aoi is still one of the best units in the game right now. However, in the future, it might change as midline units take the stage and TP bombing will take its new height level. And at that point, Aoi will probably be shafted out of the metagame. But for now, since Peko is extremely annoying, and you probably, if you see a tank, for example, Aoi is still a good choice to just chip away at those tanks, especially if that team does not run healers. Aoi is still a very strong anti-tank unit, and from that point alone, is still very much worth using. Kiaru 6-star has finally came into her own as an extremely powerful AoE mage that preys on the many low magic defense DPS units commonly seen in Arena. Notably, her Abyss Burst has global range instead of Reno's set range and will take off a huge chunk of backline units' health and injuring anything that doesn't meet its nasty magic defense debuff. It also leaves a panic debuff to anyone not dead to it. So, panic debuff does say that your opponent cannot trigger UB charges of auto attacks, which means that they are forced to use TP batteries or TP generating skills, which does charge their TP. Kiaru Turbo or Cat Turbo or Cod Turbo, depending on how degenerate you are, allows Kiaru to finally compete with strong DPS such as Summer Kaori, Reno, and Summer Mifuyu, or like AoE Cliff in general. And in some fashion, Kiaru herself is the counter to Kiaru herself, because Kiaru is the only one that can beat other Kiaru thanks to her ridiculously high DPS. She also has very strong mage support such as Kasumi, Neneka, Iyo, Misaki, as well as other stuff like Hatsune Mibi and Ram, as well as generic supports like Yukari and Samasaren. Even outside of being a turbo target, Kiaru still fits nicely into teams that struggles against low magic defense DPS, such as Yukari focused teams and Kokoro Stall. Maybe not really Kokoro Stall, but depending on the Kokoro Stall type, Kiaru fits in very nicely in. Her high damage and decent tech ability allows Kiaru to be a PvP staple for the months to come. Yuki is much like Yukari, where he is one of those supports that cannot really fall off the radar. His ability to push TP bars to the ally with the highest TP at his skill 2 window forces fast UBs and fast games by allowing UB reliant Stallbreakers such as Summer Kaori, Neneka, Ram, Reno, Kiaru, and others the final bit of TP to execute the plan. His position at being the third most backwards unit helps him dodge many cleave skills such as from Tamamifuyu's skill 1, Mimi's skill 1, and Summer Kaori UB. And unlike Yoka and Haruhi Misaki, Yuki has a workable physical defense stat because he's not a mage that can slow up a Haruhi Miyako UB, for example. He survives with about 10% HP. A charm and a blind is a variable from his skill 1 with a UE upgrade, but only the charm is a lock behind the UE, otherwise that blind is the only one that affects the skill. And although the charm is pretty useful, it's not always the reason why you run Yuki over something like an Iyo or the Haruhi Misaki with a UE. It gives him more disruption options against more reckless teams and teams that says, oh yes, I'm a Kaori team too, for example. Yuki's biggest problem is that he doesn't have any action damage. His UB is a flash of light, his action damage is 0, but these are just nitpicks to probably one of the best win more supports in the game. Kyoka is still a very powerful action speed related mage that because of her position is still very relevant. Kyoka is not only an Neneka target that allows her to become a very powerful UB spamming mage, she also has an option with Ice Lance which has a 4x crit multiplier or 400% multiplier, 400% for example. And apart from like just pumping out a lot of damage from her UB is still very strong and is certainly still a reason why you would want to use Kyoka. Kyoka has also the benefit of sitting very far back. He sits actually in front of Yuki, but it doesn't really matter much because that's pretty much the same. It says dodge a lot of cleave skill, but also have to be wary of Haruhi Miyako, who just made a slight resurgence because of her UE, and because there's not really a lot of stuff that can protect Kyoka from such a problem. Mao, for example, sits in front of Kyoka. The rise of mage supports, however, has made Kyoka into a very powerful mage, being both a source of damage from skills from Yubi, and also having a self buff on her skill 2 is also very appreciated. Next, I would like to talk about the strong units. These are strong PvP units with proven track records, and they are pretty strong in their own right. However, they do have some problems with how they operate, in which they don't really match up against the staple units, or metagame trends have make them fall off, or other factors that elude them their stable status. And finally, to close out the video, I would just like to mention that everyone else that isn't mentioned here is in the situational, or in this case super situational or very suboptimal flex. There are not a lot of units this month which are in the situational tier. I think everybody that are in the situational tier last month are still good this month. Maybe Halloween Kyoka is the only one here, because Halloween Kyoka is not really a PvP unit. She's pretty much just meant for CB. But apart from that, there isn't really much that really deserves mention here. Maybe if you like some units, maybe they're even worse. Like if you want to bring Suzuna, for example, like she's still a pretty good Christina sub, but this point, I'm just gonna call it the copium tier from here on, to be honest. And so that ends my PvP viability guide for this month. I think there isn't really much to say else other than let me know in the comment section below what is your favorite arena unit for use in this month, because my experience will be completely different than yours. And also, what if you want me to keep continuing to make this kind of video where I just talk about stuff, let me know in the comment section below, because I would appreciate it. And I believe soon I will also make like the preparation for this month's CB, because there's a lot of things going on in this month, and I believe everybody should know, and I think everybody should prepare. Well, now is actually a pretty good time to do so. Thank you everyone and for watching, and I'll see you next time.